Communities to Further Fair Housing. The webinar is presented by the Legal Aid Society of Palm Beach County's Fair Housing Project. And I just wanted to do a little housekeeping for our webinar today. We are recording this webinar and it will be posted on our YouTube page. So make sure you subscribe and share. And at the end of this web presentation, we're going to provide you with that information as well as our other social media outlets. Also, during this session, all attendees will be muted. However, you'll be able to ask all of the questions at the end of every presentation. There is a question pull-down box located on the side of your screen. So you can type your questions in that box and address them to the presenter you'd like to answer it, and I'll read it aloud for you. So I just want you to be aware the webinar does end at 11:30, and we want to respect everyone's time today. So there are some questions that we may not get to, but the presenters have provided their agency's contact information in the event you have additional questions. So thank you again for participating in the Building Inclusive Communities to Further Fair Housing. The Legal Aid Society, again, is presenting this webinar, and our mission is to provide high-quality civil legal service and advice, representation, and education free of charge to disadvantaged children, families, and individuals in Palm Beach County to protect their personal safety, enhance their opportunities and living conditions, as well as promote self-sufficiency. The Fair Housing Project at LASPBC provides community outreach, education, advocacy, and enforcement of all federal, state, and local housing laws to ensure that no Palm Beach, Martin, Okeechobee, or Hendry County resident is denied access to housing based on his or her race, color, religion, national origin, sex, disability, familial status, and there are additional protected classes covered under local and county fair housing ordinances. I also want to let you know that Legal Aid is a Fair Housing Initiatives program, and we receive grant funds from federal, state, and local governments as well as private entities. So today we have a wealth of knowledge presenting for us today, and I'd like to announce who they are, and then I'll let you get to hearing the first one. Today we have Jaimie Ross from Florida Housing Coalition. She's the president and CEO. Teresa Mcclurg. She is with the city of Boca, Raton, and she is their community improvement administrator. And Emily Gorman with Adopt a Family of the Palm Beaches. And I am your moderator, Angie Smith, and I am the Education and Outreach Project Manager with the Legal Aid Society of Palm Beach County Fair Housing Project. So without further ado, here is Jaimie Ross, Housing Coalition President CEO. And let me give you a little bit of background on Ms. Ross. She is a public interest lawyer, President CEO, like I said, Florida Housing Coalition, Director, Florida Community Land Trust Institute, Facilitator of the Sadowski Coalition, and an author, Creating Inclusive Communities in Florida, a guidebook for local elected officials and staff on overcoming the NIMBY syndrome. So I'm going to let you hear Ms. Ross. Take it away, Jaimie.
Thanks so much, Angie. If you go to the next slide, I just want to give an overview to everybody on the line about what I'm going to be covering in the 15 minutes that I'll be talking. And that is really the land use tools. That's going to be the emphasis of what I'm talking about, and the connection between affordable housing and fair housing, and how we make housing affordable in the state of Florida, and how we can do that in a way that affirmatively furthers fair housing. And I'm excited to do this presentation in the fair housing context, because very often people think about fair housing, they think only about the landlord-tenant type of situation, and not the big picture that involves how we develop our land in ways that can either cause segregation or the opposite, create inclusive communities. So if you go to the next slide, I'll get started. Angie, if you go to the next slide, I'll get started on, thank you, on what affordable housing is. So basically, it's statutorily defined, and you see the reference to the Florida statute. It goes from, from moderate income down to extremely low income as a percentage of area median income. The concept is that we don't want very low-income people or low-wealth families spending more on their housing than is a healthy amount. In other words, where they become housing unstable, so that if, for instance, the car breaks down or you lose a job, you end up in a crisis situation where you could actually be homeless, which is really the case with close to a million people in Florida. There's over 920,000 very low-income Floridians, meaning people who earn less than 50% of the area median, that spend more than half of what they earn on their monthly housing costs. So they are very housing unstable. And what we see is that Florida has a homeless crisis, the third largest homeless population in the nation. I have a couple of references there for folks to look at later. The Florida Housing Coalition puts out an annual report. We started it in 2014 called the Florida Home Matters Report, which goes through the data and statistics about housing in Florida. And I also have the reference there to the Schimberg Center, which is at the University of Florida. It's an amazing resource. It's our housing data clearinghouse for the state of Florida. Many states don't have such a resource as we have. So if you want data on what is their housing problem in your area, they actually break it down by local governments, even to the municipal level. Okay, the next slide on, Angie, if you'll go to the next one. So how we make housing affordable is really twofold. It's a function of land use planning and financing. Important point to make is that in Florida, local governments have all the power when it comes to land use. So it really is up to advocates at the local level to help local elected officials, their planning departments, to come to use good land use practices that are going to encourage the development of affordable housing. Now, housing that's affordable is not cheap housing or housing that's different from other housing. It's housing that has some subsidy in it. The greatest resource for subsidy comes from the federal level, and that is the low-income housing tax credit, which gets administered at the state level by the Florida Housing Finance Corporation. Then in Florida, we have a very special resource in that we have a dedicated revenue source for affordable housing, which is called the Sadowski Trust Fund. There's a state and a local housing trust fund, and I'm going to have a slide on that at the very end. So we can go to the next slide, Angie. So government role in land use, big picture. The local government is supposed to be promoting the public health, safety, and welfare, to be a good steward of the land for the current and future generations, and to balance private property rights with public interest. And as we go on now, Angie, I'm going to get into how they do that and why they do that. We have a state law that sometimes people forget about, and that is that every jurisdiction in Florida has the obligation to provide for housing its entire current and anticipated population, and it goes down to the most vulnerable, such as those with special needs and farm workers. And I put there the statutory citation for that. If you look at the statute, you'll see it's very strong. And it does not mean that local governments are expected to build affordable housing, but what it means is that local governments are expected to create an environment in which the private sector will be building and preserving affordable housing. Next slide. Angie, next slide. So here's some examples that promote affordable housing, and I gave you some references to the statute. When you allow mixed use and mixed income housing close to employment and services in opportunity-rich areas, allowing accessory dwelling units in all residential zones, that is encouraged. We actually have a statute, 153-31771, that really encourages local governments to do this by saying that if they permit accessory dwelling units, and we're talking about granny flats, if there's anyone out there what is accessory dwelling units. We're talking about those little houses that could be attached, detached, they could be built into the house, outside of the house, but it's basically a secondary unit that's rented. So you have a primary, you've got the homeowner's house, and then you have an additional on the property rental dwelling, which tends to be like, maybe less than 500 square feet. And that's called an accessory dwelling unit. And in that statute that I've referenced there, it specifically says that local governments that allow accessory dwelling units in all residential zones get to use that as a means of meeting their housing element requirement that we just talked about on the previous slide. This is a super wonderful smart growth tool that too many local governments are not using. It's a way of putting in extremely affordable rental housing, which is, according to the data, what we need more than anything else, into already built areas where all the infrastructure already exists. So it's a wonderful tool. The next bullet talks about progressive impact fees. There's no statutory reference on that. This is just basically we see local governments by and large having regressive impact fees, where they base the impact fee on the unit rather than the size of the unit. So if you're building a 1,000 square foot house, you're paying the same impact fee as if you're building a 10,000 square foot house. That makes it a regressive tax. Inclusionary housing policies are what I'm going to focus on most. And so we're going to go to a series of slides on that. And so, Angie, you can move on to the next slide, which is going to go into inclusionary housing. We do actually have a statute. The first reference would be the county, and the second, the opposite. And the other, the county and is 125, and then the city is 166. This is the identical language. It says, notwithstanding any other provision of law, a county or municipality, if you're looking at the municipal one, may adopt and maintain in effect any law, ordinance, rule, or other measure that is adopted for the purpose of increasing the supply of affordable housing using land use mechanisms such as inclusionary housing ordinance. So why do we have this? Because we do have a statute that prohibits price control and rent control, and to be absolutely sure that no local government or someone who is against inclusionary zoning felt that, hey, we can't have that in Florida, we have a statute that specifically permits it. So inclusionary housing policies, they're land use regulations that use a private sector to produce the housing. Basically, it's an ordinance that says when you're building this market rate housing, certain percentage of it needs to be affordable. Why is it such a good tool for affirmatively furthering fair housing? Because it means that the affordable units are going to be built in the growth areas, in the areas where the market rate housing is going. And why is that so important? Because those are usually going to be areas of opportunity. And you'll see the bullet there that says housing policy is school policy. David Rusk, the author of Inside Outside Game, really coined that term many, many years ago. It's just so true, especially now that we see that people go to school, their community school. So if your community is entirely segregated, if you live in one of those large developments, those PUDs, we have them all over Florida, where we basically have little villages that come up, and they're all, and they're not integrated. They don't have a variety of housing types in it, some of which are affordable, then everybody's going to be going to a school that's segregated. Inclusionary housing is about producing the housing and where the housing is located. Okay, the next slide. So best practices when you're doing inclusionary housing is to keep the developer economically whole. We're a very strong property rights state in Florida, so they should also get increased density by right, and and not to use a buyout provision if you can avoid it at all, to avoid it, because if they buy it out, then you're losing the benefit of, for instance, having the housing built in those areas of opportunity. And it's great for there to be a very strong partnership with local government, flexibility in addressing development, and that's what I mean about a partnership, so that it's not so hard and fast that you're going to get a lot of pushback from the development community, that you need to work with them. And most important is that you have long-term or perpetual affordability. This is super, super important. If you produce units in an inclusionary zoning ordinance in areas of opportunity, and you don't require that those units remain affordable long-term, then there's just going to be a windfall to whoever owns that unit when they sell it, and then it's no longer affordable. And so I put in there that that's why this dovetails so well with community land trust, which is the next that I'm going to talk about as we move to the next slide, Angie, is community land trust is a way of keeping that property affordable in perpetuity. You can skip this one because I already talked about this, and go to the next slide. So in a community land trust, basically what you have is that the land is owned by a nonprofit, and they have a 99-year ground lease with the home buyer, and so the home buyer owns the home, but the subsidy gets retained in the house. The home buyer doesn't get to sell the house on the open market. The house can only be sold pursuant to a resale formula, and so it retains its affordability. You can also use community land trust for rental housing. When we first started the Florida Community Land Trust Institute, we really only talked about home ownership because at that time, all of rental housing in Florida seemed to be affordable for 50 years under the Florida Housing Finance Corporation's rule. But lately we've seen a pushback on that, and they have been reducing the terms of rental compliance and affordability. So now we very much want to see community land trust used for rental housing as well as home ownership. And the next slide. And by the way, your county, Palm Beach County, has great community land trust. So the benefits are that the home's more affordable for the homeowner, because you've taken the land completely out of, they're not buying the land, they're getting leasehold interest in the land, so they're only paying for the improvements. And you get to be a homeowner rather than a renter, which means that you're making mortgage payments, and so you get the interest deduction if you're a person who does itemize on the tax return. But most important is the financial stability. It's the ability to save without the fear of the rent increase, because you're getting a mortgage, and you're getting a fixed rate mortgage. And so you can plan and you can save, and that seems to be the most important benefit for low-income people and housing. Okay, the next slide. So the key benefits for the public is that when they put subsidy, and for instance, typically it may be the land, that the land is donated, that public investment is retained forever. So a permanent stock of affordable housing is created. That is just super important as a public benefit, because a benefit to all taxpayers, because you're putting money in once, you're putting subsidy in once, you're donating land once, and you have a continual supply of affordable housing where that parcel is. Next slide. So fair housing laws, the concept is housing choice. And so the connection between fair housing and affordable housing is that low-wealth families are disproportionately people of color, race, and ethnicity are protected classes in Fair Housing Act, as is familial status, that's the children in the family, and disability. So you have the protected classes tend to be the very folks who are kept out of housing choice when you have exclusionary land use practices. And so that creates a disparate impact. And I think I'm sure everybody on this call has probably celebrated the wonderful Supreme Court decision that we just had upholding the disparate impact liability theory. and also then HUD, of course, on the heels of that Supreme Court decision, adopted its final rule on affirmatively furthering fair housing. So there is a very clear connection between land use and affordable housing and creating affordable housing and where it's created and how it's created, and disparate impact and affirmatively furthering fair housing. The next slide. Next slide is we get to what I said I'd talk about later, which is our state and local housing trust funds. Because I said earlier, the way that you make housing affordable is planning and then financing. So the Fidelity Trust Fund gets to the state finance part of that equation. So I talked about that housing element requirement, 163.3177. So that was viewed, that requirement has existed for a very long time. Local governments viewed that requirement as an unfunded mandate, which was part of, in 1992, when we got the William E. Sadowski Affordable Housing Act passed, that was part of the impetus, was we had this housing element requirement, and it was seen as an unfunded mandate. Now, as we just went over, local governments don't use just money. They use land use tools to make housing affordable, but they also do need funding to help make housing affordable. So we increased the documentary stamp tax in Florida by a dime. We dedicated that dime to the state and local housing trust funds. The majority of it goes to the local government trust funds, the SHIP program, 70% of it, and it's distributed on a population-based formula. 30% of it stays with the state at the Florida Housing Finance Corporation for the sale program and other programs. And it generates a huge amount of money. It's over $250 million a year. Now, when we were in the housing boom, we were up to like $400 million a year. Now, this year, we just finished this legislative session, and it was about $175 million that was appropriated out of the trust funds to the state and local housing trust fund program. In Palm Beach County, the SHIP program for this fiscal year is now going to receive $6,522,000. So it's a tremendous amount of money that goes down to the local level. Now, the county doesn't keep all that money. They keep like $4.9 million because you've got Boca Raton, Boynton Beach, Delray Beach, and West Palm Beach that also get a share of that based on their population. Okay, the next slide. So developing affordable housing, you need the land use, you need the funding, and you need to avoid neighborhood opposition. So we get to the next slide right away, and we'll talk about the NIMBY issue. Because it's an obstacle to providing affordable housing, and we have a connection with fair housing to address it. This is unique in Florida. North Carolina followed us after we adopted this statute, 760.26. So the Florida Fair Housing Act is in 760. We adopted a brand new provision, 0.26, which makes it unlawful to discriminate in land use based on the financing of the development. It is a tremendously important tool, and it's used in conjunction, intended to be used in conjunction with the Byrd-Harris Property Rights Act, which allows you to file a petition with local government when you have a project that you want to go forward, but it's being held up because of either neighborhood opposition or the NIM2, not in my term of office, opposition. And if anybody's having an issue with this, I'd like them to contact me, and I'll help them or their lawyer through it. And I think if you go to the next slide, Angie, I just put in a summary, and because my time is really up, I want to, I think, go to the next slide, and which I think is the end. So, because I don't want to take up, we have two wonderful speakers after me, and I don't want to go into their time, so I want to thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Jaimie. We are going to go to our next speaker, which is, and remember, make sure you type your questions in for Jaimie, and at the end of the presentation, we'll get to your questions. So our next speaker is going to be Teresa Mcclurg. She is a Community Improvement Administrator with the City of Boca Raton, and she's going to talk about federal funds and the community. Let me tell you a little bit about Teresa. Teresa served as the Community Improvement Administrator for the City of Boca Raton since 2004. Former involvement was in economic and small business development, redevelopment, neighborhood improvement, and affordable housing. Her expertise includes community redevelopment agency activities and administration of CDBG, home program, HOPWA, EDI, special report, and EDA planning grants. Teresa is certified in economic development finance. So without further ado, Teresa Mcclurg.
Good morning. Thank you, Jaimie. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I've been asked this morning to speak on how we use our federal funds in Boca Raton and how the use of those funds positively impact our community and help us affirmatively further fair housing. Since some of you may not be as familiar with Boca Raton as we are, I thought I'd share a little bit of an overview of what we are and who we are. We're a coastal community in southern Palm Beach County. We're not particularly large. We're 30 square miles in size, but we are the second most populated city in the county. We are a very fiscally strong city. We have a low tax millage rate, and we are probably best known for our beautiful resort-like environment and for being an affluent, economically vibrant city with a high quality of life. Next slide, Angie. So when we talk about what it is that makes Boca Raton Boca, or why everyone thinks we have such a great quality of life, I'll share a few of those factors with you. We're a very safe city with low crime rates. We have excellent schools throughout the city, which gives our residents excellent educational opportunities. We have 28 highly rated public and private schools for K through 12, 2 state and 3 private universities and colleges. We have great public amenities, 4 miles of beautiful public beaches, 40 parks that take up about 15 acres of land, 2 new state-of-the-art libraries, and 3 full-service community centers. Next slide, Angie. We are also a regional employment center. On any given day, they estimate that about 300,000 people come into the city. Those are people that are coming, not only live here, but come here to work, come here to go to school, and come here to consume the products and services and businesses that we have in the city. Our major employment fields include technology development, medical and biomedical, finance, telecommunications, security, hospitality, retail, restaurant, and a host of customer and personal services. We have very good access to transportation in the city. We have major arteries. We're close to I-95, and we have the most used tri-rail station in South Florida. So much so that a second station is currently being planned to meet the high demand that we have for rail services in the city. And we also have a wide range of arts, cultural, shopping, and dining opportunities in the city. Next slide, Angie. Our demographics, we have a population of about 85,000. That translates into about 36,615 households. Our population is 89% white and 11% minority. 72% of our households are homeowners and 28% are renters. And the median income in the city is $71,414. But rather than just leave you with the idea of what the median income is, I think to really understand us, you have to understand the distribution ranges of income in the city. 15% of our households have incomes of $25,000 or less. 52% have incomes of $75,000 or less. In the other range of the spectrum, 36% of our households have incomes of $100,000 or more. 27% have incomes of $125,000 or more, and 13% of our households have incomes of $200,000 or more. Next slide. So I'll tell you a little bit about our housing. We have good housing stock in the city. It's newer than what we have in a lot of our adjacent and surrounding communities in Palm Beach County. 99% of our units have been built since 1950, and 50% have been built since 1980. Boca Raton is a built-out community. We have very little vacant land, so when new housing units are added, it's largely through redevelopment activities. We have high property values here, and we have very high costs. In 2014, the median sales price for a single-family house was $471,000 and $220,000 for a condo. That's roughly twice what it is countywide in Palm Beach County. And our rents are also higher. Average rents in Boca Raton are $1,510 for a one-bedroom, $1,981 for a two-bedroom, and $2,384 for a three-bedroom. Again, these rates are much higher than our countywide rates, and they are also much higher than our HUD fair market rents. So what I was really asked by Legal Aid to speak about today is, and they're a subrecipient agent, so we've been working with them for many years, is to talk about the inclusive approach we take to our community development efforts. As a federal grantee, the city has a duty to affirmatively further fair housing, which extends to all of our programs and activities, not just our housing, but everything we do. And the city embraces this duty not because we have to, but because it's good for our community. We are committed to serving all residents of our city and to promoting fair housing choice for all residents. And by using an inclusive approach, we encourage all residents, especially those in protected classes, to help us identify community needs and priorities so that the activities we implement with our federal and state grants will be ones that increase opportunities for these persons and their quality of life. And so our goal is to help the city identify and prioritize the needs in our community so that we use those limited resources in the best ways possible. We've just completed our new five-year planning process. It'll be adopted later this month by council. And so when we do that, or when we promote our programs and activities, we want to utilize the partnerships and relationships that we have established with our public service partners, with our neighborhood residents, our local lenders, realtors, developers, and other local community organizations, to draw people into the needs assessment and planning process, and then to turn around and get program information out to the community. We use our network of public facilities. That includes City Hall, our libraries, and community centers, as well as our Public Housing Authority and our public service partner facilities, especially ones that are located in our CDBG target areas. So as I said, we just completed our consolidated planning process, so current needs are very much in the forefront right now. And what we learned is that we now have 36% of our households that have incomes that are 80% or less of median income. This meets HUD's definition of low and moderate income. We have 17 census block groups that have at least 51% low-mod residents, and 18 census block groups that have 25% or more minority residents. So we have needs for activities that will directly benefit low and moderate and minority income or minority households that include housing assistance, because we are such a high-cost area, youth services and at-risk youth programs, because intervening at an early age and helping kids access the good things that are available instead of some of the less desirable things, we believe is very important. For fair housing, education and outreach services, and a need for neighborhood improvement activities that will benefit those low mod areas that we've identified. We, as a city, we have resources that are available to us. They're limited, but they are great, flexible resources. We are a community development block grant entitlement grantee. We have been since the program was put in place by Congress. And since 1974, Boca Raton has received a total of $17.1 million in CDBG funds. We are also, thank you, Jaimie, a State Housing Initiatives Partnership Program, or SHIP grantee, and since 1992, the SHIP program has provided $11.7 million for our city. To give you an idea how that works out on an annual basis, Our upcoming federal allocation for CDBG is just over $431,000, and our SHIP allocation is going to be about $415,400. So how do we use these grant investments? What do we do with them in the city? What have we done historically? What we've done historically still works for us today. We do housing assistance programs. That's probably the largest demand that we have. Because we're such a high-cost area, first-time home buyer assistance is a mainstay for us. We do some sewer connection assistance because we are maybe in the next few years finally converting everyone from septic to sewer. We do housing rehabilitation to help those persons that are qualified from an income standpoint do repairs and keep their properties in good condition. And we also have the ability to do disaster assistance if that situation arises. So in our first-time homebuyer program, some communities like to commit their resources to certain areas or certain neighborhoods. In the city of Boca Raton, we believe that homeowners should be able to purchase the property of their choice anywhere in the city as long as that property is affordable to them and in good condition. And so we allow homeowners to pick anywhere in the city. We don't target it. And our housing rehabilitation is also available citywide. Again, we have a decent, good quality housing stock, so we want our rehabilitation programs to be open based on need, and that need is based on income. So a homeowner anywhere in the city is able to access that program. Over the last 10 years, just to give you some idea of recent activity, 154 low and moderate income households have been assisted with these various housing programs, and 42% of those were minority households. Next slide. We also make a big investment in public services. We're a small staff, and we have our expertise in grant administration and programs administration for housing and various activities. But we have excellent public service partners that help us partner with them to meet the needs in our community on a very close and personal level in the city. We've made a large commitment to at-risk youth and after-school programs. We have two long mainstay ones in the city. One is in Pearl City. That's through our Public Housing Authority. It's called the CATS program. And one in our New Pines CDBG target area. That's a partnership with Boys and Girls Club of Palm Beach County for their Boca Club. We also do some services for abused and neglected youth, and we do fair housing and education outreach, including foreclosure assistance. And over the last 10 years, 3,300 of our residents, low and moderate persons, have received services, and 86% of these were minority persons. Next slide. And the last area that we concentrate particularly our federal resources here on is neighborhood improvement projects. We want to make sure that the infrastructure, streetscape, landscaping, lighting, parks, and other activities that make a neighborhood good and make a neighborhood safe and livable, that our low mod neighborhoods have those. And over the last 10 years, we've done 5 projects in the New Pines and Pearl City target areas. Each of those projects has served a large number of persons. In New Pines, each project serves 925 low mod persons. 59% of that neighborhood is minority. And in Pearl City, each time we do a project in there, it serves the residents, which are 2,140 in there, and 41% of which are minorities. And now, next slide. In closing, one of the things I was asked to do was to tell our Pearl City story, because it is a great example of how we approach community development and how we get communities involved and how communities benefit. For those of you who may not know, Pearl City is an African-American neighborhood in Boca Raton that dates back to 1915. That's actually 10 years before the city was even incorporated. It received its local designation as a historic district. It's one of only 2 historic districts in the city, and it is historic not so much because of any particular structure. It's historic because of the cultural value and the history of the community. It's a small 6-block neighborhood located between two major north-south corridors. For those of you familiar, Federal Highway US 1 and Dixie Highway, and was our original CDBG target area. Due to the growth in the city of Boca Raton in the late 1970s and 80s, the Pearl City neighborhood was further divided by an east-west road, Glades Road. So we had this original little neighborhood that then got cut in half by a major road. The neighborhood is predominantly residential. It includes single family, a public housing complex, Dixie Manor, a small number of rental buildings, several churches, a renowned child care preschool center, and a neighborhood park that's located right in the heart of the neighborhood. Next slide, Angie. About 15 years ago, a major neighborhood improvement initiative we decided we would undertake in Pearl City. And under the guidance of a city council appointed blue ribbon committee, residents and community stakeholders got appointed to this. And this committee became the overseers, and they were instrumental in facilitating the development of a master plan for the neighborhood. And that master plan took a couple of years to get together and come to consensus on, but that master plan then led us to a multi-year phased investment of $5 million in neighborhood improvements. These are improvements that not only beautify the neighborhood and enhance the safety and security of the neighborhood, they help promote the neighborhood identity. We installed neighborhood entry signs, and we installed historical markers throughout the neighborhood that commemorate some of the historically significant things about the neighborhood. Next slide. So for us, the real success of the Pearl City Master Plan was not just about the physical improvements. It was about the neighborhood coming together to decide what their neighborhood needed. It was about residents becoming vested in their community and about effective partnering with the city. And years after the work has been completed and the committee is sunset, residents continue to meet regularly, to work together, and to work with the city for the betterment of their neighborhood. And last month, the Pearl City residents hosted a centennial celebration in honor of their 100th anniversary. And during that day, they honored their pioneer families, many of whom traveled from distant states and cities to come back. They were recognized for who they were in the founding of the neighborhood and what their families contributed to the neighborhood. But they didn't just look at their past. They renewed their commitment to working together to preserve their history, but also to steer their future. And with that, if just a little contact page, if you'd like to know more about the city, you can look at our website. Then we have a link there. And for more information about community improvement programs, you can call us or visit our webpage. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Teresa. Don't forget, audience, go ahead and put your questions in that box. So at the end of the webinar, we can ask our panelists some intriguing questions and questions that could help you in your programs. Okay, so now I'm going to introduce you to Emily Gorman. Emily is the Administrative Director for Adopt a Family of the Palm Beaches Incorporated, and she's going to give us a little overview of nonprofit developers. Ms. Gorman, a little bit about her, has been with Adopt a Family of the Palm Beaches for 15 years. She currently serves as Administrative Director. Prior to her new role, she served as the Housing Compliance Manager, where she managed HUD-funded activities, including NSP2, which I'm sure she'll talk more about, and permanent supportive housing programs. She is an active member of Palm Beach County's Continuum of Care, the Housing and Homeless Alliance. So go ahead, Emily, and start your presentation.
Okay. Thank you, Angie, for the introduction. Thank you. Thanks to Angie with Legal Aid for coordinating this webinar, and thanks to Jaimie and Teresa for presenting this morning as well. Adopt a Family is honored to participate, and our CEO, Matt Constantine, wished he could be here, but he's in Washington, D.C., attending the National Alliance to End Homelessness Conference, so poor Matt. I hope that we are able to offer a unique perspective from a small nonprofit whose mission does not focus specifically on housing development, but throughout our history, housing development has played a large role in helping us to fulfill our mission. And our mission is to strengthen families with children in their efforts to achieve stability and self-sufficiency by providing access to all-encompassing services. I'd like to begin with a history of the origins of Adopt a Family. In the 1980s, family homelessness began to emerge as a major social problem in the country. The rise in poverty, combined with the decrease in affordable housing, fueled this increase in homelessness. In 1983, 3 local Palm Beach County women saw that families were falling through the cracks. Families who were down on their luck, too proud to ask for help, and these ladies decided to try and make a difference. The ladies reached out to businesses, churches, civic groups, and individuals to adopt these families for a short period of time until they could regain stability and get back on their feet. From the beginning, the agency was founded on helping families in need obtain or sustain adequate and affordable housing. Next slide, please. As the years went by, and the agency focused primarily on homeless prevention, they recognized that the greatest need for families was really truly affordable housing. In 1992, Adopt a Family was awarded the first supportive housing demonstration grant in Palm Beach County by the Department of Housing and Urban Development. This grant allowed the agency to lease apartments in the community and rent them to homeless families at an affordable rate while providing intensive case management to the residents. So after we were able to successfully administer this grant, the agency began a giant leap into the world of property acquisition and development. So back in 1996, Adopt a Family received over $1 million from HUD, as well as funding from state and county funds to purchase a property with a total of 40 individually owned condominiums in the city of Lake Worth. This was a lot of work. Unfortunately, I can't speak from experience on this, but it was a huge learning curve for the staff here. But they were able to persevere, and this was the very beginning for Project SAFE. Back in this day, the model for federal funds was transitional housing, which transitional housing provided families with a maximum of 24 months of rent-reduced housing combined with case management and support services like childcare, assistance to return to school, transportation, clothing for employment. Additionally, at that time, Adopt a Family began operating a tiny after-school program located in the old condo clubhouse for the kids living in Project SAFE, so their parents could go to work feeling comfortable knowing their children were safe and well cared for. Next slide, please. So by the time I joined the agency in 2000, we already had 2 federally funded transitional housing programs up and running, but our board and our administration continued to see gaps in service, as well as difficulty in finding a place to place the families after they were forced to exit the transitional housing after 24 months. The agency also needed to have a permanent office for the staff here to continue the excellent work they were doing in the community. Since we had already had 40 units in Lake Worth and we had developed a solid working relationship with the city, we began to work firmly to establish Lake Worth as our home as an organization. At that time, a capital campaign was launched to acquire another 24 units of affordable housing, as well as to acquire the site to break the ground on our corporate office, which all of these buildings are all within walking distance of one another. The 24 units acquired were set up to provide housing to a new population. Those families who are working, earning meager wages, many times they were exiting from the Transitional Housing program and had the hopes of someday purchasing their own home. The program was called Service-Enriched Housing, and it offered housing at an affordable rent with a built-in component to help families save money, to help pay down old debt, clean up their credit, and put away money for a future down payment for a home. So we have the 64 units fully up and running. We have a brand new building providing office space. We decided to expand our after-school program, Project Grow. This tiny after-school program was developed into an innovative and specialized out-of-school program that not only served our children living in the housing communities, but also the kids in the community at large. At this time, Adopt a Family was cemented as a true community center, centrally located within the city of Lake Worth. When the housing boom began in the mid-2000s, we again backed into new housing ventures to address the needs we saw in the community. We began to explore and implement the community land trust model, looking to purchase property in Lake Worth and then sell or rent homes to ensure housing remained perpetually affordable as the housing prices skyrocketed around us. We added another 9 rental units through the CLT, building these units for the first time from the ground up with the assistance of state funding rather than federal funding, giving us the opportunity to provide rental housing at affordable prices with less restrictions. Affordable housing with less restrictions was also a necessity here because HUD took a turn in their focus of housing provision, and they began to encourage all grant recipients to switch from the transitional housing model to that of permanent supportive housing. Next slide, please. And if I may, a couple of things to note about permanent supportive housing. First, all families must meet HUD's definition of homeless. So that means people must be literally homeless, sleeping in a place not meant for human habitation. You might think of a park or under a bridge or staying in a car or residing temporarily in an emergency shelter. Second, permanent supportive housing targets families with disabilities. So that means if there's not a chronic, long-term disability that impacts a family's ability to sustain housing, permanent supportive housing is not an option. A family who was simply not earning enough money was no longer eligible to receive housing services through the Project SAFE program. Next slide, please. Again, with these systemic changes and our belief that the access to affordable housing combined with support services is the first step for our agency to achieve our mission, we sought out the City of Lake Worth Community Redevelopment Agency to apply for the funding available through the Neighborhood Stabilization Program 2, commonly called NSP2. NSP2 was established as part of the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act of 2009, part of one of Obama's stimulus packages. The Lake Worth CRA Consortium was one of 56 awardees in the United States selected by HUD to receive over $23 million in funding out of a potential $1.9 billion. This program was intended to stop decline in targeted neighborhoods where vacant, abandoned, and foreclosed properties were creating blight and crime, as well as to help create jobs, forge community partnerships, and revitalize a stagnant economy. Adopt a Family's role as a subgrantee of the consortium was to purchase and redevelop homes for homeownership and affordable rentals. In the end, we sold 17 homes and are currently operating 24 rentals. This process may sound straightforward, but let me assure you, it was kind of a wild ride. Adopt a Family had a unique advantage as a nonprofit because we were experienced in housing development. So we hired project managers to help see this through, because while we are skilled at providing social services, and strengthening families to become stable builders we are not. Interestingly enough, though, for the first time in our agency's history, we were about to become realtors. NSP2 took time. It took patience, a lot of meetings, walking in shoes we are not comfortable in, and some trials and tribulations. Our dream was to follow the community land trust model in terms of financing. There are a lot of promises, a lot of hope, but in the end, there wasn't a bank in the country that would finance us through this model at the time. We were totally bummed. We would show houses, we felt great. We really thought, this person's going to buy this home. And then when it came down to the financing, we would get shut down. We were eventually able to make it work, following homes affordability guidelines and implementing deed restrictions. And today we can look back and see the huge accomplishment. We definitely learned a lot. So why what we do works? With NSP2, we received program income from the home sales. We continue today to receive operating income from the rents each month. These rents are really affordable. They're less than half of a rent that is considered fair market rent in Palm Beach County. So for a 2-bedroom, we rent these homes at approximately $600, and in Palm Beach County, the fair market rent is approximately $1,300. This program is completely self-sufficient. Our other housing programs, we've raised the money, both government funds and lots of private funding from like-minded foundations and individuals. We're fortunate because we have no debt service and we have paid for all of our buildings. The City of Lake Worth, we've been really fortunate to have an amazing partnership with the city. We have a great partnership with the CRA, whose own efforts have made a huge impact in this city. We've never received any complaints about NIMBY here. They've welcomed us with open arms from the beginning. It's a really good fit. Lake Worth is one of the most diverse cities in Palm Beach County. We have a diverse staff and a diverse clientele. Both our staff and our families support the local businesses, participate in city events like the Street Painting Festival and neighborhood cleanups. They serve on city boards and neighborhood associations and enjoy the beaches. We're only a mile away. Our office is an anchor in the community. Next slide, please. For a small nonprofit, we've been really fortunate. One of our past presidents is a fair housing attorney for legal aid. As you can imagine, if there was anything that seemed like it remotely could have been a fair housing violation, it was remedied immediately. But that's good. Ignorance is not an excuse, so I'm confident that she saved us. Not from blatant discrimination cases, but just really knowing what fair housing is about and making sure that we operated on the straight, narrow, and transparent. So many other organizations have taken us under their wing, offering us technical assistance and learning opportunities, like the Lake Worth CRA, the Florida Housing Coalition, HUD, as well as developers, contractors, and architects. We've been so fortunate to have outstanding partnerships with people willing to share their knowledge and help us through the times when we were not the expert in the subject. And we do the same. When someone comes to us for help, we provide it. Next slide, please. Today, we own or operate 117 units of affordable rental housing. Approximately half of those units are dedicated to housing homeless families, and half focus simply on affordability. When we work with families coming in for homeless prevention assistance to stay in the homes that we don't own, we never see rents less than $900 a month. All of our apartments are under $725 a month, with many rents being calculated based simply on income. But we do more than housing. We are not a leasing office. We know our families, every single one. We strive to maintain a family environment for those who live and work with adoptive family. Next slide, please. And for the future, we take pride in our mission and vision. We may not look like a developer, but we've become one. We are happy to provide decent and truly affordable housing. We believe affordable housing is a right, not a privilege. We provide support in conjunction with the housing because we know that's what works. And we're not done. We're in the process of finalizing the site plans to break ground to build an additional 12 units of affordable housing, to open up more green space for our children, and to add a little space to enhance programming. We love our city, our CRA, our partners and our families, but most importantly, we at Adopt a Family love what we do. Thanks to everyone for tuning in this morning, and now I'm ready to gratefully turn this back over to Angie.
Thank you so much, Emily. And if you want to know more about Adopt a Family, their information is right there on the screen. And you can just go and visit them and, give them a call or find out, maybe there's a family that you know of that is in need of assistance, such as what Emily talked about today. And I'm sure the staff can give you more information as needed. So today we just kind of learned about affirmatively furthering fair housing. Doesn't only apply to just affordable housing. It's the safety of the neighborhoods, the education of our children, especially in non-segregated schools, integrated areas of living, and a complete infrastructure that speaks to the growth of the neighborhood, of the community, transportation, and also ending homelessness, so and et cetera. So it's not just making housing affordable. It's so much more to it. So we're going to get to some questions if we have questions. I don't see any questions. So if you have any questions, go ahead and submit them so I can present them to our speakers. But I just want to say that one of our participants said that your presentation, ladies, it was very informative. So I just wanted to let you all know that that they are listening, and they're saying that you've informed them on things that they may not have known about before this webinar this morning. So I don't see any questions. Is there any more that you ladies have to say before we close out today? And you're all unmuted, so you can go ahead and speak.
Oh, Angie, this is Teresa. I would just like to say thank you. It's very nice to be able to participate in a forum like this and to hear what others do and to be able to share what we do. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Teresa. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day. So, I mean, if there are no questions that anyone wants to ask, like I said, the session is being recorded. We're going to post it on our YouTube page. And, oh, I do have a question. Okay. But we're going to post that on our YouTube page and let you go ahead and share that. So someone is asking, how do communities in Palm Beach County work together at a larger scale to address affordable housing? I don't know who to address that to. So if any one of you want to take it.
We worked with the Lake Worth CRA
and this is Emily speaking.
Yeah, this is Emily. And there was probably over 20 different partners involved in the NSP2 program. I mean, besides Adopt a Family, we did 41 units. The program at large did like 130 properties. So the CRA developed homes, Habitat for Humanity was a huge partner, and then we worked with other funding entities. I mean, and as I said, it was a lot of work. It was a huge commitment, and it took, you know, between the time the grant was written and the first home was rented, it was probably 3 years. So it wasn't like, hey guys, let's get together and get some properties. Like it was a time commitment, and the you had to be patient for the outcome of the future.
Someone wants to follow up to Emily's presentation. Trying to see the name, but it says, I am happy to announce that there are now a number of banks lending to community land trust in Palm Beach County. So awesome. That's awesome.
And you know,
news.
we have CLT homes here with Adopt a Family, but during this period of time, I don't know what happened, but we weren't able to get financing to do our homes through the CLT model.
I have someone named, I think is Alexander, says that nonprofits and realtors and banks get together every month to discuss what is happening and upcoming events. So, Alex, if you can, you know, give us that information, like where that is. So
I think it's at United Way.
Yes.
Affordable Housing.
They are meeting today. It's Affordable Housing Collaborative of Palm Beach County. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Sounds good. PBC Housing Collaborative, I think that's what
yes.
it said.
Yep.
Yeah. Let's see what else we got. Other questions. Yes, he said yes. Let's see what else we got going on. Someone says your knowledge is powerful, and these women provided us with quite a bit of knowledge. Thank you so much. So, like I said, they were listening and taking notes and commenting on how knowledgeable you ladies have provided us all your knowledge today. I don't see any more questions. But again, I will say, did someone else have something to add on to anything?
Angie, I would just like to add that in terms of working together and in addition to the Housing Collaborative, we also have the Palm Beach County Housing Leadership Council. That's Suzanne Cabrera's group.
Yes, and I believe Suzanne is on today.
Yeah, that's another good resource for you know, sort of the overlay and gives us a lot of avenues to share knowledge and collaborate, even though it may not be on physical projects. I think that it offers a lot in terms of understanding, keeping current, and learning from each other's experiences.
Okay, so this is going to be the last question, and it's directed to Jaimie. Are there any financial incentives for new developers to build the accessory housing, which is encouraged by statutes?
I'm not sure if Jaimie's still on.
Let me see. Oh, Jaimie had to go. So I will send that question to Jaimie for you. But we are currently out of time. And like I said, follow us on our social media, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter. And thank you to our presenters and our participants on behalf of the Legal Aid Society of Palm Beach County's Fair Housing Project. I would like to extend a heartfelt thanks to you. Please remember to complete the evaluation form that will be emailed to you after the webinar. Thanks again, and have a wonderful day. Thank you so much, ladies.
Thank you.
Thanks, Angie.